We've had a cool front come through. It's in the low to mid 70s. It has been in the 80s and sunny for the last few months. But just glad I'm not in the northern part of the country where they had this late April snowstorm. We're going to talk about effective retention strategies to keep your current families enrolled, because I think it's one of the most important topics for us to take a look at. And just to give you a little feel for who I am, because I may be somewhat new to you, but I've been working with schools really my entire career. Give you a little bit of a history on me. I'm a graduate of Michigan State for my PhD program. In fact, I spent 28 years of my life in Michigan. I worked at a private university for 12 years, heading up enrollment in marketing and development, and then moved to Florida to become head of school, a school of about 1,000 students, K through 12, before making the transition to work in the marketing world to help schools across the country. So I'm a Spartan, and another thing about me is I love Starbucks coffee. In fact, when I wrote my dissertation for Michigan State, I wrote it in Starbucks. It's a great place to be able to go and for me to be able to focus and tap in the caffeine into my veins so that I could be productive and write. This is my family, my wife Janine, my two boys Caleb and Benjamin. This is from a couple years ago right over here on the beach. I'm fortunate enough to live about a mile from the beach, so we frequent that location often. And my kids have grown quite a bit since then, but I wanted you to get a feel for who I am and the family behind the guy or the voice on the other end of this webinar. One of the things we love as a family are roller coasters. In fact, we've ridden every roller coaster in Florida multiple times. 2 years ago, we took a trip and went to Cedar Point, which has now become our favorite amusement park for roller coasters. And you can see this one here, the Top Thrill Dragster. If you've ridden this one, you know what type of experience this is. You start out and it launches you at about 110 miles an hour. You go straight up 410 feet and then straight down, and it's all over in 20 seconds. Well, that's what it feels like sometimes to lead the enrollment and marketing effort at a school. We start out in the morning, we're launched out, and we go up and down, and that's continual throughout our day and throughout our week and throughout our months. And so one of the things I help schools to do is I help schools by coaching them in their enrollment and marketing effort, where I come alongside, provide an assessment of where they're at in their enrollment and marketing effort, put together a plan and strategy, and then work with them over time. And I do that via Skype or go to meetings so that we can have face-to-face meetings, and I work with schools all across the country. And you can check out my blog as well, and you can find that on my website, and you'll find that I've written quite a bit of articles on the subject that we're going to be discussing today on retention, and you may want to become a subscriber and just hear some of my thoughts along the way about some best practices in enrollment and marketing. Well, school growth is very, very important to me. In fact, it's really, as I look back on my entire career, that's what my career has focused on. When I was Director of Enrollment Management at the university where I was at, that was very, very important to my role. In fact, we were a small university of 710 students. During my time, we basically doubled that enrollment. That's not all because of me and what I did and the strategies I put in place, but it was about many other factors. And as we look at our schools today, there's lots of factors that contribute to school growth. And you see, about 10 of them or so here on your screen, and there's more. In fact, I think this would be a great study for someone who's pursuing a master's degree or a PhD program, and you wanted to do some research, maybe even some case studies, and try to get a feel for why schools grow and why some schools do not grow. And you look around that wheel there, and you see it's everything from leadership to the quality of the school experience, the vision, faculty and staff, parent satisfaction, reputation, location, price, competition, enrollment and marketing plan. All those contribute in some way to the overall potential growth of the school. And if a few of those things are out of whack, then it's going to negatively affect the potential for your school to grow. And by the way, I was telling Karen before we started the presentation that I tend to pack my presentations with lots of information and lots of slides. In fact, we have about 110 slides we'll be cruising through. So my approach is more of a rapid fire, talk quickly, get a lot of ideas out there so that you can have some takeaways to this presentation. But school growth is certainly important for all of us. I mean, we're looking at retention today, which is one facet of the area where we need to focus on in terms of enrollment growth. It's a key one, obviously. Well, certainly, we would like for our enrollment lines to look like this. You know, when I went to Best Buy the Saturday before Thanksgiving here in St. Petersburg, that was 6 days before Thanksgiving. And I was amazed when I went in on that Saturday and there were already tents set up on the sidewalk. People were getting in line. They hadn't even seen the sale papers yet for what was going to be on sale in Best Buy. And there they were lined up to get their first place in line so that they could be in the door when the doors opened up Thanksgiving morning, or the day after Thanksgiving, actually, and rush into the store and get their valuable electronic equipment that they've been wanting and just had to spend 6 days on a sidewalk. Now, that's not what it sounds like to me as a good idea of fun. In fact, I can't imagine how people would do that. Now, one of the benefits of living in Florida is that you can see they're in shorts, so it's comfortable. It wouldn't work in Michigan, where I was from. But we would like for our enrollment lines to be this way, for people to be lined up out the door. And in some cases, this is the reality for some schools who are, more prestigious and more selective in terms of the types of students and families that they're attracting to the school. But I would dare say for most of us, in my experience with working with schools, we don't have these types of re-enrollment lines. So we want to take a look at the issue of retention. And I like to look at retention as being the strategy of re-recruiting our current families back to our school for another year. We think about recruiting new families into the school, which is the other component to our enrollment strategy. This is re-recruitment. It's basically once we get a family into our school, we have to do the best job that we can to try to re-recruit them back for another year. Because it's really a false assumption for us to assume that once they walk through our doors and enroll their child in our school, that they're going to be there all the way through 12th grade. Because they may not. They may move away. They may decide to go to another school. Finances may become an issue, or whatever the case may be. There may be dissatisfaction with the experience, and so they may not stay in your school. So it's really a false assumption to look at that family coming in. We need to do a really strong job at keeping our families enrolled in our school because it's more cost effective. It's obvious that once we have a family in our school, that the cost is not going to be as significant as what it would be to go out and find a brand new family within our community. And typically, as we look at retention, the issues are greatest between the transition years. That's typically where we might lose a student. You look at a school that goes all the way through 12th grade, for example, and often I'll hear the students and parents talk about that 8th and 9th grade transition as the child wants to maybe go to a public school or experience the greener grass on the other side, and or the larger programs or whatever it may be. But our focus needs to be on retention and re-recruiting those families back for another year. So when you think about the value of your families, I think it's a very important question to stop and think about how valuable your families and your students are who enrolled at your school. Because really, it's an opportunity that you have as a school to fulfill your mission. Because without students, you have no mission. And you can also make that life-changing impact on the life of a child. And then you can also gain revenue, not only for this next grade or the grade that they're enrolling for, but also the entire span of their experience at your school. And if you take it a step further and you take this illustration here, let's say you have a kindergartner coming in. They're enrolling in your school. And some of these things we've already just talked about, but we have a student in our class for the next year. We have a parent who's going to be able to hopefully tell other parents in our community about our school. I'm a huge believer in developing a word-of-mouth marketing strategy for your school. In fact, I'll be speaking at the SSATB annual meeting in Chicago, and one of the things I'll be talking about is developing that word-of-mouth marketing plan. But it's also an opportunity to gain tuition revenue for the next 12 years. Certainly, that's key. Not that we want to put dollar signs on our students so that we see that on the heads of our students as they're walking around their school, but it is significant. So take this illustration. Let's say your tuition is $10,000. Then you you have the ability to bring in 120,000 plus over the next 12 years after they complete their kindergarten year. And so that's pretty significant. If you're double in tuition than that, then obviously you can double the revenue. But what happens if the student leaves? So if they leave after kindergarten, that's $120,000 that is lost, not counting the tuition increases that you would have over those years and additional revenue that you might bring in. After 5th grade is $70,000. Those are significant revenue dollars that are lost to your school. Now, when I look at retention, I like to go back to my higher education days when I was Director of Enrollment Management. And one of the resources in higher ed was a book by Vincent Tinto called Leaving College. He wrote it first in '87, revised it in '94. A lot of research and studies have been done on retention in higher education. Hardly anything that I can see has been done in independent school K-12 education. But as you look at what Tinto has to say, he says that the key to effective retention is a strong commitment to quality education and the building of a strong sense of inclusive educational and social community on campus. So it comes down to two things, quality and community. So as we look at our schools today, I think the same principles really apply, that parents are going to be most likely, they're going to continue to enroll in our school when they're satisfied, and when they're connected, when their child is connected, when they have friends, they have relationships with faculty, they're involved in groups or sports or drama or musical or band or whatever it may be, that's when they're going to be willing to continue their sacrifice and investment in your school. So I think it's important for you to think about this issue of retention and really get at the question of, do you know why your families leave your school? And I've just listed a variety of reasons that are pretty obvious, and you can see financials here at the top. That's typically the number one reason of what I hear families today talk about why they're leaving a school. But typically there's other ideas or there's other reasons that are connected in with that. They may say financial, but it could be a bunch of other reasons that come down to overall dissatisfaction at the school. Perhaps they're relocating, and it's hard to really do anything about that one. They may be moving out of state or to another community, and it's too far for them to send their child to your school. Maybe they're just looking for free education at a public school. The grass is greener on the other side. Maybe there's a lack of programs. There's something specialized they're looking for in another school. Maybe there's some kind of philosophy conflict that they may be having between what the parent believes and what's actually happening in the school. Perhaps it's just the prestige of another school across town, and it seems like they have a better college placement success rate in getting students into Ivy League colleges or the best colleges in the country, and so there may be reason to consider moving them in that direction. But you get an overall feel that there's lots of reasons for parents and students as they look at why they may be leaving your school. One of the things I certainly look for is the overall satisfaction level. I want to know, is there dissatisfaction at the school? So one of the things I'll always do is to conduct a parent satisfaction survey and focus groups to get a feel for what parents are saying about your school. I want to look for themes and patterns and to see if there's areas of dissatisfaction at the school. If there are, then your retention rate is going to be certainly hit by that. Maybe there's just a lack of leadership and vision for the future. That can certainly have an impact on retention, and I'll talk about that a little later on. But I think it's also important to look at this question in the opposite way. So to look at, do we know why families stay at your school? So here's some responses that I would provide for you. Number one, it's overall satisfaction with the school experience. They truly do like your school. They're overall satisfied with the experience. Certainly there may be something, because no school is perfect, and when asked, the parent is always going to have something negative to say, it seems. But overall satisfaction can be a key driver why parents stay. We talked about the connections. We talked about the community. Those two things go hand in hand together. It's the students connected with the overall community of the school. If you see a student not quite fitting in or doesn't have connections with friends, even some cases the parents, because often you'll look at a parent, they'll not only choose the school for their own child, they'll be involved in choosing the school for them and perhaps their own social network. A commitment and belief in your mission, the ability and willingness to pay tuition, that's key. And it's both ability and willingness. Certainly they have to have the means, but they've got to be willing to make the sacrifice or the investment to pay the tuition rate at your school. They believe in the difference your school makes, and they really desire the best education. And it's really when that school's perceived value matches that actual educational experience, there's a willingness and commitment to stay and pay. And I love that phrase, stay and pay, because that's what it's all about. We want them to stay. We certainly want them to pay, because revenue is going to drive everything that we do in our schools. So we have to work on then developing our re-recruitment strategy. So this is really the meat of our presentation, my presentation this afternoon, is to highlight for you a variety of strategies, and you can see the list there on your screen. We're going to be talking about all of these particular areas here during our session, our webinar this afternoon, as we look at what I feel like are some key re-recruitment strategies for you at your school. So let's start with parent satisfaction, and I believe really this is the most important one, because if we don't have parent satisfaction, retention is going to be in the tank, and it's going to be hard to, we can implement all the strategies that I recommend, but if parents aren't satisfied, if there's issues with the quality of the school, it's just not going to work. We're not going to be able to have that impact on retention. We've got to look at improving the overall quality of the school in order for our families to stay. So I look at key indicators whenever I'm conducting surveys or focus groups. You know, I want to get a feel for what parents think about when it comes to the academic programs, the college preparation, the faculty. In fact, faculty play a key role in the retention effort. I mean, they're the ones who are on the front lines. They're driving home the mission of our school on a daily basis. Without faculty, we have no school. So they're the most important assets we have as a school and in our retention strategies. Community extracurricular programs like athletics or the arts, and the safety and security of the school environment. You know, I want to know how and what parents think about these areas at a school. And it's interesting whenever I conduct a survey like this at a school, typically food always shows up at the bottom of the least satisfied areas. I can almost predict that at the bottom is going to be food and cost. And so, you know, we need to maybe do some things about improving our food programs in some of our schools. And I know some of your schools out there that you have a great program for your food service. And I've eaten a number of meals that are awesome. So parent satisfaction really can tie into vision and leadership, and I believe that enrollment's going to rise or fall based upon the leadership at the school. It's so important that, you know, our leadership, our head of school, our leadership team, our board are driving towards continual improvement. They want to continually make this the best school that they can have in your community. And I believe, too, when parents can see the leadership striving towards that quality, or always moving forward, being proactive and taking initiative, that's going to help to build confidence in parents, and that in turn can have an impact on retention. One of my favorite leadership books is by Kouzes and Posner. It's called The Leadership Challenge. And I'd highly recommend that you pick that book up and read it. It's in several versions. I think it's on the 4th version at this point. I actually used it as part of my doctoral dissertation. But one of the 5 practices of exemplary leaders that they found in their extensive research is inspiring a shared vision. So if you want to know if your head of school is an exemplary leader, then they're going to be about inspiring a shared vision so that they can get everyone involved. I love this quote: leaders have a desire to make something happen. to change the way things are, to create something that no one else has ever created before. They're forging new territory. They're being an entrepreneur. They're on the frontier, and they're forging this new path, creating this innovative, engaging educational environment. And they're not only leading the way, but they've got everybody around them. They're bringing everybody together with them. That's because it's shared, and it needs to be shared. I think a lot of us have seen visions and strategic plans and documents that have been written and maybe put on a wall or posted on a website, and then maybe it's done for an accrediting review, and it's not paid attention to. And I think that's where we get into this issue with this quote, where vision without implementation is hallucination. And we don't want to hallucinate anybody in our school. In fact, when we do, when we don't implement our vision and our plans, then that's going to impact retention. So it's so critical today, I think, to have a an engaging, forward-thinking, forward-moving type of head of school and leadership team that can really move the school forward, and that has significant impact on retention. And I mention it here as one of my strategies, and it really is a strategy, because if you have weak leadership, then it's going to be a negative to the overall school. And certainly you could try anything and everything you can in your role as enrollment management, enrollment manager, director of enrollment, whatever your title is, but we have to have strong leadership in place. So let's move on from there. Certainly we can spend a lot more time on leadership and vision, but I want to get into some strategies that are specific to retention and re-recruitment. And I'm a huge believer in understanding the data. I want to have a data-driven enrollment management strategy. I want to understand what the numbers tell us. So it's surprising to me how many schools I'll go into and they really won't have a handle on their retention rate. They may have a guess as to what it is, but they haven't actually looked at it specifically, especially to narrow it down and look by division or transition grade level or even individual grades to see what their retention rate is. And I put my definition of how I want to look at retention. Basically, it's the number of students who came back this in the new school year divided by the number of students we had enrolled last year minus the graduating class, or in essence the students who are eligible to re-enroll. And I want to understand the relationship between those two numbers. And that becomes a huge part of the enrollment and marketing strategy, because if our retention rate is at 85% and we want to try to improve it, so what do we need to do to get up to 88% and be able to move it forward? So those are the types of things that I would work with a school on implementing those various strategies. I also like to have in place an enrollment dashboard report to try to understand in a snapshot exactly what's going on with your enrollment at all times. And this is a detailed view of a spreadsheet, and you'll be able to get this PowerPoint afterwards, and you can look at this in more detail. But any school that I'm working with, I want to make sure that they're looking at the total enrollment data. I want to understand re-enrollment for every grade level, whatever grade levels you have at your school. I want to understand what's our available pool, how many do we have re-enrolled, and what's the difference between the two, the in-process or undecided ones. Now, certainly we could adjust some of these lines or categories based upon specifics at your school. But I also want to look at re-enrollment with new students, because I want to get an understanding of the enrollment funnel, the admissions funnel. How many inquiries on down to applications to students, new students who will be enrolled. I want to see that in total and how that relates to our goals, and then how many more students we need. And what I encourage schools to do is to really put this report in place. In fact, I was just reviewing this morning with one of the schools I'm working with, and we were having coffee over at a little coffee shop because it's a local school that I'm working with, and looking at the numbers and trying to understand what's going on and what needs to be done. It's so important. One of the other things I encourage schools to do is to grade your students, your current students eligible to re-enroll, based upon their likelihood that they're going to come back. Now, you might be using some kind of a system. Maybe it's 1, 2, and 3, or A, B, and C. I like to use FM and S. F stands for firm. They're very likely to return. Everything you know about them says they're coming back another year. M is moderate. They're on the fence. They can go either way. You've heard mixed things about the family. S is shaky. They're unlikely to return. So it just doesn't look good. Maybe they're late in their tuition payments. Maybe there's been a discipline issue. You know, and maybe all indications are that, you know, the family's going through tough financial times, and no matter what you do, you're not going to be able to provide the financial aid that they need to continue their enrollment. This gives you a snapshot where your students and families are at and the potential for them to come back for another year. What that allows someone in enrollment to do is to zero in and focus in on the moderate families. And that's where I want to spend the most time, reaching out to those families, because they're on the fence. I can have the greatest opportunity to maybe move them over to a firm. And I really believe that this task here falls into the leadership team of the school. So it's not just the admissions or the enrollment director, it's the principals, it's the division directors of your school who are leading the charge. They know the students, they know the families, and they need to be actively involved in the retention effort at your school. Now, who's responsible for re-recruitment, all these strategies that we're going to be talking about? Well, really everybody's responsible, every faculty, every staff member at your school. But I think there needs to be someone who can champion the effort. And I like to look at the Director of Enrollment, Director of Admissions as being the person to really champion the cause for retention, to lead the effort. Now, when I was in my role in the university, one of the strategic things that we did is we hired a Director of Retention, and she acted as an admissions counselor really for all the current students to try to focus in on those students who are graded in the M category, the moderates, to try to encourage them and deal with whatever issues that they were facing to try to get them to come back to the university. And maybe for some of your larger schools, you may want to think about that type of a staff member or a responsibility on your team. You know, typically in the admissions enrollment office, we gear all of our staff responsibilities to recruitment, and so this could be a way to get someone focused in specifically on retention. And then you can see some of the responsibilities, and they're obvious for what that person would be involved in, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. But it does fall into everyone's responsibility. Every faculty, every staff member at your school needs to be focused in on retention. So I look at the role of a faculty and staff member, and I want to actually spend a couple minutes on 9 roles of faculty and staff in the retention process. In fact, I just presented these 9 roles to a school I'm working with in Wisconsin, and we did it via GoToMeeting. So I did it from my home office and presented to them so that they could get a feel from my perspective what their primary roles are involved in the recruitment process at their school. So number one, it's obvious that they need to do their job with excellence. So I like what one teacher said to me in a focus group, you know, what we do best is when we close our classroom door. And that's really what we want them to focus on. We want them to do the absolute best job in the classroom or out on the athletic field or helping the students prepare for that big presentation, big musical event on stage. But everyone's involved, and they have to do their best at what they're striving towards in your school. So that's an obvious one. You know, really the brand on the outside is only going to be as strong as the brand on the inside at your school. So there's nothing magical we can do to correct issues on the outside unless we don't start with it on the inside and have excellence at what we do. Number two, faculty and staff have the opportunity to turn negative conversations, gossip into positive brand moments. So they're going to be talking and relating to parents and students along the way. So it's important when they hear negative comments or issues that they don't join in the conversation, that they actually will spend time listening, and they might turn a negative moment into a positive brand moment, or they might redirect it to the administration that they could deal with a particular issue. But it's very important that faculty and staff don't get negative or don't get involved in that type of conversation. Number 3, everyone should be a storyteller, and this is one of the themes that you will hear in any presentation that I give. It's about telling stories. So as faculty are in the classroom or you're leading as an administrator, you have the opportunity to tell stories about your school. And those stories are what connect with people. And so we need to be storytellers to let our students in the classroom know about our graduates and the success that they've had, and to tell some of those stories along the way, or whatever the case may be. Number 4, we want to celebrate our students, parents, and colleagues. We need to come together as a community to be able to celebrate what's going on in our school. I think about a little thing of acknowledging student successes, because that can go a long way. What if every faculty and staff member sent at least 5 positive emails every week, or positive notes to parents in your class, in their class? That would make a significant difference just in parents hearing positive things about their child in your school. Often it's the negative communication. Well, we have a problem with Johnny. He's acting up in the classroom, or he's not doing quite well in his math homework. And so we need to talk to you about that. Well, let's talk about some of the positives. Number 5, welcome visitors on campus. I was on a tour recently of the school I'm working with, Canterbury School of Florida, and they took me on a tour, and it was pretty cool. Every classroom I went into in the lower school, I was greeted by a student ambassador. A student came up, they shook my hand, and they said, "Welcome to my class." They told me their name, and it was just cute. I mean, I had these kindergarten students coming up to me, or first graders, and just making me feel welcome. And the faculty and staff can make prospective students feel welcome on the tours. Certainly we need to do everything we can to focus on retaining students. I like to encourage faculty to look into their classroom and do everything that they can to try to keep their students and families in their school for another year. Number 7, provide outstanding customer service. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, where we can roll out the red carpet for our families and create a wow experience for them. Number 8, make every effort to make this one school. Sometimes we end up being in our own divisions and not connecting with faculty or staff in the lower division, but we need that opportunity to be able to share and celebrate in the successes, because when the preschool wins, the entire school wins, and vice versa. We need to look at this in a unified effort that we need to win together at the issue of retention. And number 9 is make personal connections with parents and students. I mean, that's key. It's really about those one-on-one relationships that we can have, and sometimes we need to go to the extra mile of sending a handwritten note, or maybe a positive email, maybe to give them a birthday card on their special day. What we're about is wanting something memorable that's going to be talked about. Community connections. We talked about that earlier, about that's one of the keys to retention, as Vincent Tinto talks about, and we want to make sure that our families and our students are connected in, because when they are, they're more than likely to remain enrolled at our school. So think about, what can you do to intentionally foster community connections at your school? Well, you're doing a lot, I'm sure, and you have all kinds of events and activities that help to build that community connection along the way. I think it begins with new students, and some of the things that you would do with in your admissions office with those new families coming in, of maybe connecting them with a parent ambassador, someone that can mentor them, maybe having social groups, or cookout, or pool party, whatever it may be, in the summer before they actually enroll, to begin those connections. That's where it starts, and then it feeds into the school experience, where they can be involved in lots of different things, and you see just the beginning list of some of the things that they can become involved in. One of the schools that I had the opportunity to work with a couple years ago is Palm Beach Day Academy. Wonderful school. down in Palm Beach, Florida. And one of the traditions that they have, in fact, this tradition has been going on for 80 years, is dividing their students up into either a flamingo or a pelican. So when every student comes into the school, they're assigned to be on one of those two teams. And what's cool about this is that they're assigned to that team for life. So once a pelican, always a pelican. And when you come in as a pelican, your entire family is part of that pelican group. And so you have a little brother or sister coming up, they're going to be a pelican. And it's pretty cool that they have this history and tradition, and what it does is it fosters community. So they have activities and events that surround these two groups, these two teams throughout the school year, and it culminates in the traditional field day that they have in the spring. And just an awesome experience, an awesome way to build community, and alumni come back and they get involved in the field day events. So it carries on that connection even after they're gone from the school. So we need to develop that plan to intentionally create community connections. So to actually think strategically, what are the things that we're going to do and what are we going to have in place over the upcoming year to build that community. Again, there's so much more that we potentially could talk about, even just hearing some of your ideas and thoughts. But with limited time, I'm just trying to hit on some of the key strategies. Customer service. We talked about this a little bit earlier in one of the 9 roles for faculty and staff, but it's really, I think, a key area. We are a school, an organization that deals with parents. We deal with students, and whether you like to call them your customer or not, they are. I mean, they're paying for a service, they're paying for an education, and they're expecting something in return, and that's the education for their child. And so there's expectations that go along with that. One of the books that I highly recommend is by Donna Cutting. It's called The Celebrity Experience. Awesome book on customer service, and I would encourage you to pick this one up. In the book, the one thing that I like is she uses the example of High Point University as really a premier example of customer service, and they really do everything right. And I just barely scratched the surface here of some of the things that they do. One of the first things the president did when he came on the scene several years ago from the business world is he hired a director of WOW. He wanted to create this WOW experience for the students and parents and alumni and guests of the school, that he wanted someone to focus in on that. So they do a lot of things at their university to create that WOW-like experience. And sometimes it's just the little things. It's the little things like delivering birthday cards and making a student feel special on their birthday. It's what the president does when he's in his office and a tour comes by. I mean, wouldn't you love it? You're given a tour and you're going by your head of school's office, and no matter who your head of school is meeting with, he will stop the meeting and come out and shake the hands of that prospective student and family, because they're very, very important, and they want to make the president or head of school wants to make that visitor feel very, very important. He has this little deal where he'll have the student put a quarter in a gumball machine, get a gumball, and that's actually how he knows that there's a visitor in the office, because the prospective parent and student and tour guide are in the office, and he hears the gumball machine going on because his assistant has made this process happen. And so it's this little tradition, and it creates this service culture there at the university. And as you read the book, you'll be able to see lots and lots of ideas for how they've implemented this WOW-like experience at High Point. Everything's branded HPU. In fact, on the next screen, I just got a couple photos off their Pinterest page that they have recently launched, and you'll see that they have a welcome sign for visitors. You see a Benjamin standing out by his sign. It's a digital sign, so that's his parking place, as he's has reserved for the day when he's visiting. They have this kiosk on campus, and they give out to students free bottles of water. In the wintertime, it's hot chocolate. It's just a way to say thank you, we appreciate you as a student at the school. Sometimes it's little things like that that can go a long way. So as you think about your school, what are some of those things you can do to be unique, maybe on a student's birthday, or to create a memorable, to give students something memorable on special days. Like I had one school that I worked with this past year on Valentine's Day. They put together chocolate Hershey bars with a Valentine's note, and the Valentine note said, "We love our students," and all the principals went to every classroom and hand-delivered those chocolate bars to their students on Valentine's Day. Now, what did that cost? Hardly anything. What was the mileage they got out of that? A lot, because the students would take that. They are appreciative of what happened, and they would share that with their parents. I mean, whenever my kids come home from school, I ask them, how was school? It was good, it was fine, and then they really don't have anything else to say. But when something unexpected happens, then you have the opportunity to hear from them, and they're excited about it. So think about, like maybe this Friday, you're going to go and you're going to rent a slushy machine. And what's that going to cost you? Maybe $100 and the supplies. And you're not going to charge for it like every fundraising group on your campus does. You're going to just pass those out free to your students. Why are you going to do that? Because you're going to just tell your students, we so appreciate you. We just wanted to say thank you for being a student. And that's going to go a long way. And that creates that wow-like experience, that memorable moment at our school. And customer service also can focus in on little things like the person who answers your phone. That's the public voice of your school. I don't know how many schools I've called and had a secretary answer, and you feel like you're not very important, that there's lots of activity going on in the office, and you're just something that they don't want to deal with. And so, it's that first impression that's very, very important whenever we're making that personal contact with our current families, our students, our prospective families. So we need that commitment to service where we really take time to listen and respond and treat our families like celebrities. And that helps us to stand out in a crowded marketplace. You think about your market, you might have a lot of competition. Maybe there's growing competition from charter schools, or maybe the public schools are getting better, and you have to be on your toes. Why should someone invest $15,000 in your school? Sometimes it's the little things that can stand out and can make a difference about the overall community and experience that you're offering. This next strategy is obvious. I'm not going to spend much time on it, but it's to identify at-risk families. And it's clear, we have students who are at risk for a variety of reasons, and we need to reach out to them. So we might need a system in place. Maybe it's a retention early alert profile, and a faculty or staff or coach member can fill out this form and communicate it back to you as the enrollment director, as the leadership of the school, and then you can plan interventions. You can deal with whatever the issues are to try to hopefully salvage their enrollment so that they would continue at your school. Re-enrollment. A lot of us have gone through the process of re-enrolling our families for this next school year, and it's a process where we want families to commit and sign up and pay for this next school year so that we have enrollment predictability and budget. We can budget accordingly. There's lots of different strategies. I'm not going to suggest that there's one right way. It kind of depends on your situation and what you're facing. Certainly if you're in a high demand situation for your school and limited seats, you're going to have more of an opportunity, being more in a position of power in terms of dictating exactly what families need to do and how they need to re-enroll. If you're not in that situation, there's going to be a lot of different strategies that some schools will use. Maybe there's a re-enrollment fee, maybe there's a penalty that's applied after a certain date, or maybe it's the other way around, there's a discount by an early date. A lot of schools use that. One of the things that I think would be a great strategy to consider, and I've seen this begin to work in some schools, is assume enrollment or have automatic continued enrollment. Think about a student and a family coming to your school. The message should be, when they're first enrolling at your school, once a student, always a student. And that's our goal. We want to have you as a student for your entire career and to the point when you graduate. So some schools, especially with high retention rates, are going to automatic or continued enrollment, and so that's a process where they don't have to actually go through a process of trying to re-enroll and fill out a bunch of paperwork, going through an online process. Basically, they're re-enrolled, and if we don't hear from you, if you don't opt out, or we don't opt you out because of a certain issue with their child, for example, then we're going to debit a tuition deposit or a re-enrollment fee on a certain date. And so that can become a process for us where we're looking at re-enrollment in that way. And I think it's a good way to look at it for schools with strong re-enrollments, strong retention, because it's amazing to me how we continually ask every year, well, it's re-enrollment time. Are you coming back? Let's reverse it. Let's state it in the positive. You are coming back. This is the place where you need to be, and we're assuming and continuing your re-enrollment. Certainly, there's lots of things you can use from online re-enrollment. We certainly live in this world today where parents expect to re-enroll online. You can look at perhaps a timeline of some of the things that you could do. I like to look at re-enrollment as a great time for internal marketing and trying to do a lot of different strategies around that time to encourage their re-enrollment. Maybe you want to have a campaign where you can remind your parents of what you've accomplished, what is ahead with your vision. Maybe you can have banners and billboards, small group events, spirit events. You can kind of really have this campaign. We think about having a campaign to attract new families to our school. Well, re-enrollment needs to be more than just about putting a mailing together and sending that out to families. There needs to be a strategy in place. And if you're still sending out a packet, we need to make that case for re-enrollment. We're still using forms. At least maybe we can pre-print the forms with our information on it so that we can have our parents just review that and check off that everything is accurate. Certainly, financial aid would play a role in the re-enrollment and retention strategy, and I just wanted to mention it here. This could be a whole hour-focused webinar, if not more, on using financial aid to maximize your enrollment. This is the area where I feel like schools often forget is what happens after re-enrollment. So we have a family who commits, they're re-enrolled for another year, they're coming back, so what do? We need to thank them. We need to thank them in several ways. Perhaps the head of school sends a handwritten personal note. Perhaps there's obviously a letter that goes out from the enrollment office. Maybe we send them a gift. Maybe we take the next step and ask them to write an online review for the school. This is where we get into some of the marketing issues. Maybe we ask them to put a post on Facebook. And there's 2 examples of the Facebook status posts that they could put to help us spread that word of mouth to the community that you're trying to reach, because that's free advertisement for you, and that's what you're after. Focus on the transition grades, and I'm going to have to fly a little bit even faster because of the time where we're at based on the amount of stuff that I packed in. But transition grades are grades where you're typically going to lose some families, where they're going to be transitioning from 8th to 9th, and they're looking at other options. I like to take the one family at a time approach, where we can reach out and we can spend time one-on-one with families, find out what their issues are, and help to deal with those issues to try to re-recruit them back for another year. And I like to start on that process earlier rather than later. So, right now it may be too late to really work on this. Certainly there's some that we can salvage, but to begin working on this in October, November, maybe we have dessert briefings where we invite students from our 5th grade to come to family homes and learn about what the middle school experience is going to be like. Maybe we do that at the school and call it Next Year and Beyond meetings so that our families can get a sense for what next year and beyond is going to be like at our school. A lot of schools have step-up days where it gives the students the opportunity to experience what it's going to be like at that next level. All of these are great strategies to make sure that you have incorporated into your re-recruitment program. The same with mentoring and buddies and being able to connect students to students, because they can have a peer-to-peer connection and a peer-to-peer influence over that child and family's decision. Communication, internal marketing, this is really the last area that we're going to spend the next few minutes on. And it's kind of a key area. You know, we need to communicate, and then do it more. As we look at internal marketing, it's really that effort to continually reinforce our brand and our experience to our parents. You know, it's important that we tell our story, and we tell our story over and over again through real people, through real students at our school. So you heard me earlier talk about sharing stories, and I really think that that is where marketing comes down to. So we look at internal marketing. It's communicating those stories about our alumni, our faculty, staff, and students. You know, I think if parents can see their own child in the story, then they can see their child continuing on at your school. If they can see that success and that story in an alumnus, then, you know, wow, that gives them hope, and that gives them reason to be able to commit and continue investing in your school. We have a great opportunity in our web-based world to be able to tell our story online, and we can do that in lots and lots of ways. Over the weekend, I reviewed about 170 independent school websites for another speaking opportunity I'm working on, and it was amazing to me just how many schools weren't really taking advantage of the web as an opportunity to share their story, and to be able to share that story through real students and faculty and alumni along the way. Some schools were using blogs and Facebook effectively, and I just want to show you a few of what I found. Brookwood School was using a page called their B-Pod, and that was basically where they were communicating a photo of the day, and that helps to share a story of what's happening at their school. They were also using B2, which is videos to show the life of the school. Just kind of a creative way to show that. Cranbrook in Michigan, I like this heading, Cranbrook School's alumni shaping the world one story at a time. And that's really what it comes down to. And they share some stories of their alumni, and just very powerful, and they have just an outstanding reputation and history. Calvert School went to their blog page, and they had over 50 blogs from faculty and staff on their website. And obviously they're using blogs as a key way to be able to tell their story. You look on Facebook, and this was Harpeth Hall, and I pulled out some of their Facebook posts. You notice how every story that they're trying to tell is tied into a photo. The same is true of Miami Country Day, and doesn't this look like a cool school to be a part of? Just the ones that I pulled off were the most recent post that they were having a buoyancy cup with floating their boat across the swimming pool. They were having a mini Woodstock concert series. They were setting a record by baking 1,000 cookies in their solar cooking thing that they have on our campus, and just kind of an amazing experience, an amazing school that I fortunately had the opportunity to work with a few years ago. Email newsletter, this is a mistake that I see schools make. We fill it with events and activities, but we don't tell stories. We need to tell stories. La Jolla Country Day, they're using a news section format, like almost like a newspaper online, to be able to, like a mini website, to be able to tell their stories as to what's going on. Shorecrest here in St. Petersburg, they have e-bites, and that's their weekly news, and this is their heading, and you go into it and you can see some of the stories. This is just one, and it's tied in, as you can see, to a video here on the screen. But don't forget to tell your story in person, because in person also has significant effect with a large group meeting, state of the school address, whatever it may be. Our goal throughout this process is to try to get our parents, who are the talkers, the positive parents, talking about our school. One last example that school enrollment leaders have used is to create a marketing minute email that goes out every Friday. It starts with a story and then shares some of the real stats as to what's going on in their school in the enrollment or marketing area. It's a great way for you all to keep connected with your faculty and staff. Certainly signs and banners. And your goal in all this is to create raving fans in the process, and that's what hopefully you end up with. Don't forget to have parent feedback. I mentioned earlier about a parent satisfaction survey. Make sure you're doing that, and try to do exit interviews at your school. I made it. We're exactly at an hour. I know I went through a lot of that very, very quickly, but I try to jam-pack my sessions, webinars with lots of information. Certainly, maybe Karen, if there's a key question or two you want to ask that's been asked, I can address that. But if you have specific questions, you can address those to me, and I can reach out to you via email. You can check out my blog, or I can even talk to you personally on the phone about, or we can set up a Skype meeting and talk about what you're facing at your school and how I might be able to help you. So thank you again for this opportunity. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen at this point, and we'll go from here.
Okay, thank you so much, Rick. That was incredible. And lots and lots of information, and obviously you were very good at explaining it. We have only 3 questions, so that's great. I'm going to start with the first. Mimi Mulligan asked, can Rick recommend a solid and informative parent satisfaction survey?
Yeah, you know, I know that, and I haven't reviewed this one, but I know that NAIS has one that's available for NAIS members. I have developed my own that I use with schools in the research process, and I'd be glad to, you know, share that with you, Mimi, if you're interested in reviewing what I've done with schools. But those are 2 examples of potentially what you could do, and I do recommend that. You know, it is helpful to use someone who is outside of your school to conduct that, because parents are going to feel more freer in their willingness to share, knowing that it can't be tracked back to them specifically and maybe jeopardize potentially their students' enrollment or what leadership thinks about that family. Good question.
Okay, great. Scott Eckstein had asked, when you put up the chart in the very beginning of the presentation, we're going to put that up on admission.org, by the way, for everybody. But he asked if you could explain what canceled referred to on that chart.
That would be basically any current student that you have out of your available pool who has canceled their enrollment for this next year. In other words, they're not coming back. You may want to also add a line for denied. So there may be some cases where you're denying a student to come back for another year.
Okay, great.
Question.
And my last question is from Sally Kydell. She's asking, could you talk about desert vision casting?
Yeah, I think in a school, whenever you're putting together your vision and strategic plan, it's a great opportunity to set up some meetings in homes. In fact, I did this when I was head of school. I had about 15 key parents that then in turn invited a small group to their home where I could go in and they would have dessert and coffee and would give me opportunity in a more informal environment in someone's living room to share about the vision and where I see the school headed and give them an opportunity in that format to interact with me. So that's what I mean by in-home dessert vision casting.
Excellent. Okay, I just want to remind everyone that I'm going to be recording this webinar and putting it up on admission.org. That'll probably happen within the next couple of days, and I'll be sending out an email to all of you with the link to that page. It's not password protected, so anyone can see it, so feel free to pass it on to your colleagues. I'd like to thank Rick for your time today and for giving our members such an excellent presentation, and we look forward to seeing you at the annual meeting.
Thanks, Karen. And thanks to everyone for participating today.